Thank you, team. That's wonderful. So if you don't know me, my name is Laura, and it's such a privilege to be speaking to you this morning as we continue our series about going deeper with God. Each week, a member of our leadership team is going to come and share with you some things that God has put on their heart for us as a church as we enter into this season together in this new year of 2021. And I've brought some things to help me with my talk this morning. So I don't know if you can see, James is going to zoom in on this table here. I have some yummy vegan pancakes that I made this morning. Let me know if you want the recipe. Lush. Some muddy trainers, one of my Bibles, a game that I love to play with my family. It's called Skyjo, and a nice cozy blanket. I wonder if you can think about what they might have in common and what they might have to do with this talk. Now, Charles mentioned I am talking about rhythms. We all have rhythms in our lives, don't we? We get up, we get washed, well, hopefully. We brush our teeth, and we get dressed for the day. Well, I don't blame you if you're at home sitting watching this in your pyjamas with a cup of tea this morning, but those are usually the rhythms that we follow for our day. We have good rhythms. We have rhythms that draw us closer to God, and we have rhythms that perhaps take us further away from God too. And one rhythm that I have in my life, each year to give me a focus, I try and think of a word of the year. I ask God what he wants to put on my heart for that year. And last year, in 2020, my word of the year was joy. Now, 2020 was quite a difficult year for joy to be my word of focus. And all throughout 2020, I was seeking to choose joy. It was certainly a challenge, but at the heart of this, throughout this past year, having this focus has drawn me to really seek to learn the rhythms of how we can experience joy even when there is lots to not be joyful about. And I've learned that what I've learned this year, I'd like to share with you this morning and challenge myself about too, because having our rhythms knocked and having our routines knocked sometimes means that things that we'd had planned to do go out the window. And all of us in those past seasons have had our routines and our rhythms knocked around and not put in the place they normally are. And I think it's really important to have these rhythms in our lives, and we experience God's grace through rhythms. And I think as a church, we need to be attuned to God's restful rhythm for our lives, walking in step with him, allowing space to wonder and awe at the world in which we are born into, and feel the breath of God walking in step with us, drinking deeply from the wells of his faithfulness. You might recognise some of those words from the psalm that Charles read earlier on. So just take a look at some of the words that really stand out to me from Psalm 34. Charles read the Passion Translation. If you haven't experienced the Passion Translation before, it is just a beautiful poetic translation of the Bible. And the Psalms in this translation are just translated really beautifully. So I wanted us to think about this psalm in this translation this morning. Some of the phrases just to dwell on. Drink deeply the pleasures of God, the deep wells of his faithfulness. Embrace the joyous mercies he gives. Make peace your life motto. Gaze upon him. Join your life with his, and joy will come. Drink deeply the pleasures of God. Wow, wow, wow. What an awesome psalm to draw us into God's presence. But how often do we take time to drink deeply? How often do we seek God in our ordinary everyday lives just by taking a quick moment to read our Bibles, our quick prayer slot, and expect God to show up in our 5-minute allocated time and think, that's it, I've got to pray now. God calls us into rhythms in our lives. And we see this in nature, don't we? I love it, just walking in nature and getting inspiration from the world around me. As an artist and a creative, it just inspires me in wonderful ways. But nature has slow rhythms. We're walking through winter at the moment, aren't we? But spring is coming, and you'll notice the trees have dropped their leaves. The trees look quite stark, but they drop their leaves so that they can bring new life in the spring. Nature's rhythms sometimes feel slow, but those are the rhythms that God has made. And I wonder if sometimes in our fast-paced world, we live a life where we're hurrying, rushing from thing to thing, and working towards the heartbeat of a culture that is all about being busy means being successful. And even in lockdown, I find my diary full from morning till night. Busy, busy, busy. Lots and lots to do, from beginning to end. And we live in this world that kind of celebrates this sense of being in a hurry, celebrates being busy. But hurry isn't really something we see God do. When do we see Jesus rush from place to place? When do we see Jesus so full that he can't stop to talk to somebody? He takes his time to drink deeply from the wells of God's faithfulness and takes time to rest. Where do we in our lives take time to walk in the rhythm of God? So I want to talk particularly about a practice this morning that I know I so often fail to do. A rhythm that God instructs us to do in our lives. And I know will help us as a church to drink deeply from the wells of his faithfulness and experience the joyous mercies of God, tasting and seeing that the Lord is good. We'll read in Psalm 34 in the NIV version. Now, how well do you know the Ten Commandments, I wonder? How well do you know them? Now, if you've been a Christian a long time, you probably think, yep, I could rattle them off. Or even if you're a new Christian, you probably learned about them at school. And how often do we break these 10 commandments? Now, there's basic ones like honour your father and mother. Try and do that. Don't commit murder. Definitely isn't something I would seek to do. Notice how they come after one another. Honour your father and mother. Don't commit murder. Interesting. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't give false testimony. And I think most of us would feel confident that we would try really hard not to break these commandments, these rules of life that God has put out for us. But there's one we can so often forget in our world today and skim past. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy 5 from verse 12. If you've got a Bible at home, I'd love you to get it out, open it up on your phone. Deuteronomy 5, starting at verse 12. And let's read this together. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labour and do all your work, but on the 7th day is a Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, or any of your animals. I don't know how many animals you've got at home, but I don't have a donkey or an ox, but nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest, as you do. Now notice this in verse 15. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Notice that remember. This is the only commandment where God feels that we need a remember in there. It's almost like he knew that it's the one that we're most likely to forget, we're most likely to put aside. Now, perhaps you come from the camp that says, this is all well and good, those rules of life and commandments were written for the Israelites thousands of years ago, and culture has moved on. So they were written for that time. They were written for that time in the world. And we eat bacon, well, most of us do, I'm vegetarian, and we've got more complex, busy lives than perhaps the Israelites had, where we can work 24/7 and we can communicate around the world. So surely these rules were just for them, so we can kind of ignore this one. Yet, if you look throughout Christian history, Sabbath has been observed. It's only in recent history that we've really neglected this commandment. Now, Sabbath means to stop, to pause, to rest, to set aside, to worship, a holy day. It's a rhythm that's hugely countercultural. When does the world tell us to stop? When does the world tell us to take time to awe and wonder at the amazing, awesome God that we have? I remember being a child when there was a big debate about Sunday trading hours. When I was small, shops, for some of you, you won't remember this because you'll be younger than me, shops weren't allowed to open on a Sunday. So it was an idea that across the country we had a day of rest. But now, even though we have Sunday trading hours and they're not allowed to open as long hours, I think as many people pass through Tesco or any other shop, be it that, on a Sunday as they do on a Saturday, just within a more condensed time frame. And we've got communication in an instant. And we've got these devices, like this one here, our phones, that are there all the time. They command our attention, don't they? With notifications. And I wonder, in this fast-paced world, in this busy life, what would happen if we actually just hit the off button? Did you know these phones have got a button that you can actually switch it off? I don't use it very often. Wonder what would happen if we did that, if we switched it off, if we took time to soak in the joyous mercies of God, took time to rest, as this commandment tells us to do. The Sabbath is supposed to be a day of rest. And I have to admit, that I, in this time, have been living in sin. I have not been following these 10 commandments to a whole. And I've failed in this last year particularly to build in this rhythm of rest, this rhythm of Sabbath that God is calling us to. And when rhythms of life have been so disrupted for so many of us and filled with so many different things, trying to make ends meet, trying to change the way we're working, trying to work from home and constant Zoom calls and 24/7 Teams and trying to fit everything in, we need to take time to rest. We need to take time to choose joy and drink from the wells of his faithfulness in this ever so challenging time. So this sermon is for me too. In order to drink deeply from the words of God, I need to place my roots deep into his word. I need to take Sabbath. And when I have had this practice in my life, I don't know if any of you have experienced this, trust me, everything is so much easier. It's so much easier to face the stressful amount of work that you have to do the next day. It's so much easier to take yourself back when you start to have an argument with someone you love, because you have rested. Taking a day to worship, to spend time with loved ones, to appreciate the world and gaze in wonder at creation is such a blessing. To be grateful for life, to eat, to seek joy is such a treasure. And it's a commandment. So how about this? During this lockdown, why don't we as a church take time to reset our practices, our spiritual rhythms, and be intentional about making time to stop and to rest? Making time for Sabbath. And did you know that rest and sleep dramatically affect our mental health? Psychiatrists in the UK have said that the rise of mental health problems, there were people studying it with students, and actually they reckon that 60% of the students who were struggling with their mental health would have not had that issue at all if they were having regular rest and sleep built into their rhythms. Our bodies are made to need rest, and we blossom and we flourish when we rest. Someone asked me recently what my favourite age of bringing up our daughter was, and I was very diplomatic at first, and I just said, well, you know, every age is lovely. I love it when they're small and when they're big, with different challenges. It's such a pleasure and such a treasure to be able to be a parent. Obviously, it's hard as well. But when I thought about it, really, my favourite age is that of a 2-year-old, a toddler. Someone who has big wide eyes that see the world in the awe and wonder that it really is. Everything's new, everything's amazing, everything is something to wonder and awe about. And they have such a pure, unbridled joy about the world, not knowing what's around the corner and then experiencing it, and it's new and it's amazing. But life has a way of beating that awe and that wonder out of us, doesn't it? We get betrayed, we pour our energy and our time into something, and then it blows up in our face, or it doesn't go the way that we hoped, or we lose something, or we lose someone we love. And there's sometimes a thin layer of hardness that fills around our hearts. And then we get burned again and something happens again, and it's like this layer in our hearts just gets a little harder and a little thicker. So we can end up rolling our eyes more frequently and maybe getting a bit more cynical and jaded and skeptical about the world. And we pull back and we retreat from life. You think to yourself, why would I stick my neck out if I'm going to get shot at again, if I'm going to get burned again, if someone's going to hurt me again? And ever so gradually, we can find our hearts hardening, and we're not living in the joyous mercies that God is calling us to. We stop seeking God, and we can become a spectator in the world. Where has that awe and that wonder gone, the sense of joy gone? I don't believe that this is what God intends for us as his holy people, as it's written in Psalm 34, and we looked at today. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste is about the full engagement of our senses. Taste is about our flesh and our blood encountering the divine. Taste is about an awareness that God is as close as our breath. Jesus invites us to this taste, to experience a new thing that God is doing in the world. And are we willing to participate? So, living a life that embraces Sabbath is a great way for us to engage with all that God is doing. We're to become like a child. Do we taste? Do we allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by the beautiful taste of God? If we want to find joy, we need to make time to cultivate and nurture this wide-eyed sense of wonder about the world, and we need to Sabbath. So as we take time to rediscover, to taste and to see, to pause, to rest, to worship, to delight, enjoy and take Sabbath, to enable our roots to grow deeper with God, may we be open to the new things that God is doing, wide-eyed and filled with a sense of wonder and awe. So you might be wondering what these things that I brought with me this morning are saying about this talk. Well, I want you to imagine, during this lockdown, what would your perfect Sabbath be? What would allow you to really, really rest? What would allow you to make a day holy, to set it aside and spend time with God and worship and with loved ones and to choose joy? Well, for me, when I imagine my perfect Sabbath, it involves eating some nice vegan pancakes. It involves spending time reading my Bible, spending time in the Psalms particularly. It involves going out for a nice long muddy dog walk, playing some games with my family and my loved ones, seeking joy in the people that God has put around me, and maybe cuddling up under a blanket and just being cozy and resting and sleeping. What does your perfect Sabbath look like, I wonder? So let's drink deeply the pleasures of God. Embrace the joyous mercies that he gives. Let's make peace our life motto. Let's gaze on him, join our life with his, and joy will come. And I pray that as we discern God's patterns in our lives, we will get into good and godly rhythms, and we'll find others with whom to walk. That the outcome will be fellowship, friendship and fruitfulness. A life that is lived to the full. A life in awe and wonder of God, embracing the discipline of rest and allowing space to feel the breath of God walking in step with us.